Hello and welcome to the Wedding Dish Podcast. Grab your fork and knife and take a seat at our table as we dish on all things weddings. You'll hear stories and tips from real couples and wedding pros about love, life, and entrepreneurship. I am Sarah Alpin. I'm your hostess with the mostest on the Wedding Dish, and I am CEO of Photos from the Hardy and District Bliss. Sadly, today we do not have my little Frenchie co-host in his podcasting chair. He is on Neighborhood Watch. He does have a responsibility to keep those streets safe out there and make sure that everyone who passes says hello and tells him how cute he is before proceeding, or he will make those Frenchie gremlin sounds at them. Um, Before we get started, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, you have to check it out. Lynn Resnick of Lynn Resnick Photography was sharing tons of great information about wedding photography pricing for traditional weddings and micro weddings, and including like tons of stuff about how to make tiny shifts that can save you money, and also set expectations and all kinds of good stuff. So thank you everyone for tuning into the Wedding Dish. Let's dish. Today we're talking about how your wedding day is not really, air quotes, your day. And today's guest combines her experiences as a multi-award-winning wedding makeup artist with her background in higher ed and educational counseling. And I am very excited to welcome back the founder of First Look, Jacquelyn Burke. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Excited to be back.
I know. We were just talking, it was February 2021, I guess, when we recorded last, which seems like a million years ago.
Yes.
Well, I know this is going to be a meaty episode, so let's just dive right in. I know you're incredibly passionate about today's topic. So let's start with, why is it so important to you that couples get emotional support throughout the wedding planning process?
Yeah, I am incredibly passionate about, I like to say the potential for the role that wedding planning and getting married can play in our human experience, which is a super philosophical thing to say. But I think part of what I mean is that weddings present a really unique opportunity. We're going through a lot of changes when we get married. And because it is such a family and social event, it's all under this context of celebration as well. And so it brings up a lot of different opportunities for strengthening relationships and learning more about ourselves. And there's just so many moving parts and pieces. So I really see it as a way to explore some of those things.
I could not agree with you more. It is a moving pieces. That is a great way of putting it. It's kind of like a Rubik's Cube, except you're standing on it and it's just flat. It's like in Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade.
Oh my gosh.
When
okay,
he has
go.
to jump
I'm ready.
when he has to spell out Jehovah and jump on the letters to get through to the actual, to find the Holy Grail. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
And then there is all the other stuff that's moving at you once you get through there.
Yes, totally.
The rolling boulders.
Yes, I'm saying like, yeah, for sure, totally, as though I know exactly what you mean. I have never seen that movie. So like, but I'm sure that is exactly like wedding planning. Yes.
Now you're going to have to watch it. It probably won't be as good as it was when I watched it for the first time in the 80s. If I learned anything from making my husband watch The Never-Ending Story as adults, it didn't hold up in the same way for him as it did for me.
They never do. Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. So what do you mean when you say your wedding day isn't really, air quotes again, your day?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think the first time I said that, or even like, I know I put a post together on it several months ago. but it for sure was something that was like kind of a hot take or like a controversial opinion. And it came about in part because I was on my social media feed across the many platforms, and felt like in the span of a couple of days, I must have seen at least 20 different pieces of content, that all had messages along the lines of like, this is your day. Like, you should do whatever makes you happy and like, don't listen to anybody else's opinions. This is your day and your day only. Ready, go. And for me, in my experiences and in the context of my training, it's one of those things that sounds really good. And the reality is that in my experience and working in the wedding industry for a long time, that message of like, this is your day, that's actually where a lot of stress and potential for conflict shows up. So the idea that like when you decide to marry somebody and then when you decide to plan a wedding celebration, because those also can be and are two different things, the desire to want to have it be your day, if we're not conscious of some of those other dynamics and pieces and Indiana Jones boulders, I guess, allegedly, according to those who have seen the film, then we can get kind of like snuck up on by the reality that like, oh, actually we have relationships with a lot of different humans in our lives, right? If we're lucky. And we can't just like, wedding planning doesn't happen in a vacuum. And there is a way, and this is really the heart of my work, to intentionally and thoughtfully include those people that we care about, in the context of our own capacity. So it's not just your day. If it was just your day, then everybody would just elope and get married in the woods and nobody would know about it, which you're fully allowed to do. But right,
Yes.
that's some of the nuance there, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and even then, it's funny. I in season 6 had on a couple that I photographed their elopement, and even then, they had some friends and family members who was very upset with them that they were not able to be there,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, "We're just going to show up." So then it turned into, "We're not going to tell you where we're getting married."
Yeah.
And it's just, so even if even in those situations where you are thinking like, oh, I'll elope and then it'll just be about us, the reality is that people who love you want you to be happy, and
Right.
they have an idea of what should make you happy because they have been visualizing this maybe even longer than you have.
Right. Yeah. And I know that's something that came up in our previous podcast together. But it's something that for sure continues to come up with clients I'm working with now, in terms of, we don't even often realize that we have expectations about something, or that our parents or siblings or friends or other loved ones maybe have expectations about something. And that actually, kind of the idea of there being conscious and unconscious expectations, leads into what we call expectation epiphanies in First Look's emotional support services. But that's a big one. And I think it really is part of that whole like, oh, right, like this is not just my day because I am in relationship with all of these other people.
Yeah, for sure. And you're in relationships with those other people because you choose to be in those
Right. Right.
relationships for the most
Ideally,
part.
yes. Yes.
So you brought up expectation. Oh my gosh, I
I know it's
cannot talk
tricky.
today. Expectation epiphanies. Tell me what that is. What does that mean?
Yeah. So it's a very, I mean, it's an alliterative and cute thing to call it. I know. I'll sometimes joke that I will forget every once in a while that I was raised by a preschool music teacher. And
Oh my
then,
God.
right. And then sometimes things happen, like I term something like everything in my business is alliterative, like expectation epiphanies, right? And that's why I'm like, oh, yep, there it is. Boop. Um, anyway, it is helpful for memory, fun fact. But
Yes, it will stick in my brain for sure.
uh-huh. Yeah. So, in the context of wedding planning, the wedding industry, the wedding planning experience, when I'm talking about expectation epiphanies, what I mean is the experience of coming across or like stumbling upon an unconscious expectation. And most commonly, what ends up happening is that we won't realize that we've been holding on to an expectation about something until that expectation isn't met or isn't able to be met because something happened or somebody made a different decision. And so then there can be lots of kind of like layered or even domino effect emotions in terms of we maybe have the initial surprise of like, oh, like I didn't know that I had an expectation about that. So we might feel surprised and just caught off guard. Then we might have feelings of like frustration or anger, maybe some guilt or shame, right? A meta emotion, the feelings we have about our feelings. All of that goes into expectation epiphanies, and they are so common in the wedding planning experience because we are often not taught how to identify and think about and then communicate about our expectations.
Yeah. Or yeah, even within, as you were saying, like within our own selves,
Mm-hmm.
having like real that, yeah, that I love that. That's brilliant. Okay, so tell me about the fresh start effect.
Yeah, that is another big one. And it can go along with expectations and expectation epiphanies. But I think the fresh start effect actually is something that goes back to maybe why emotional support services are so important for wedding planning, or why wedding planning is such an emotional experience. So the fresh start effect is actually a term that comes from psychology. It's not actually like of the wedding industry necessarily. But the quick version is that when our brains and bodies, but like specifically the brain, when we go through major life changes, right? Getting married, having a baby, getting a new job, moving, right? Major life changes, the brain actually is more likely to embrace and adjust to change in other ways as well. So, like, we're going through a big life change or a milestone. And then the brain just kind of becomes more open and flexible, and the capacity that we have for reflection, for asking questions and being curious, all of those things increase with the right tools when we are going through those major life changes. So the fresh start effect in the context of wedding planning kind of gets back to what I had said at the beginning of our conversation in terms of when we are planning a wedding and getting married. It's kind of like this built in opportunity to have a lot of things going on. And if we are conscious of some of those things, and if we want to dig into it a little bit, the change of getting married can also be a way to maybe make some changes in how I'm communicating with my mom, right? Or the relationship dynamic that I have with my best friend that maybe I've been wanting to address for like a while and haven't really found a way to talk about it. And now can I like use the wedding planning experience to kind of get at some of that? Um, and that is all in part because major life changes, even like milestone birthdays, what they do is provide us with shared social structures for memories and relationships and experiences beyond like the main event. So we'll often hear about people, right, like when they turn 50 or when they turn 21, there can be a lot of like reflection, right? Like, what has my life been like to this point? Do I like what's going on? What's important? Do I want anything to change? So all of that juicy goodness shows up so much in weddings. And so that's a huge, huge part of what I end up working on with my clients.
Okay, so can the fresh start effect cause expectation epiphanies?
Oh, so if I'm understanding what you are asking, maybe, the way I think about expectation epiphanies is not that they are necessarily like caused. They are more often things that are maybe uncovered or realized. And so when I'm thinking about planning a wedding and going through that fresh start of like, right, getting married and having this big celebration to mark that big life change, it might bring up things like my decision to become a parent or not, or my feelings about money, or about faith traditions, or about my relationship with my mom, right? Any of those pieces. So it certainly can cause things to maybe be brought to the surface. So if that's maybe what you were asking in a way, then yes, is the short
Yeah,
answer.
like I guess like cause them to rise up in like
Yeah.
or become more apparent.
Yes, for sure. Yep. And that's,
Interesting.
yeah. It's really part of the whole, when I first started offering this service, it came about in part because I had been working in the wedding industry as a makeup artist for several years. And then was in graduate school, finished up my graduate degree, also have a career in higher education and student counseling. And when some of my first makeup clients, right, maybe they were still following me on social media or we were still in communication. And I was starting to talk more about and I'm a counselor, right? Like I just finished graduate school. I got so many messages from those clients being like, oh, like you have counseling skills. Like that's why my experience was right. Like it was not just makeup, girl. Like my gosh. And then when I started posting about emotional support services, I was like, this is a professional service that I offer through First Looks. Some of those same former clients being like, are you kidding? Like, my gosh, that would have been so cool and so helpful. But one of those things too, where like, we don't know what we don't know.
Yes.
And for sure, for like most of 2021, clients of mine who had hired me to be their makeup artist, which like, yes, love it. I will put makeup on people until I die. I love it. If they had opted to not also have emotional support services, which is fine. They can go together. They can be separated. Easily 75% of those clients on the wedding day, at some point on the wedding day, would like grab my arm or like find me at some point and be like, man, I wish. Like, oh, that would have been really cool. Like, I thought I was going to be fine, but it could have been really awesome, And not that their wedding day was then like a disaster. Everything was beautiful. But just that awareness of like sometimes we don't know that maybe some extra and like really specialized support could make the experience feel that much more comfortable. And we don't know until then we're having the experience. And it's like, oh my gosh, why do I want to cheese grate the shins of everyone I have ever met, even though I love them, right? It's the sneaking up on us piece again.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Totally. And honestly, I think I probably would have been in the same boat. I would have been like, no, like I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in therapy. I don't need like additional therapy or something. But like it's a totally different piece. And I think part of it, and I say this all the time on the wedding dish, but part of it is that our clients typically our clients it's their first time going through anything like this.
Right.
It's their first wedding. It's their first time going through the process of everyone around you being emotionally charged.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'm actually really glad too that you brought up the therapy piece. So I know it's, laws and rules are different state to state. I will often use the term the term counselor to refer to the work that I do. I am not like a certified mental health professional, right? I am not a clinician. I am not what I will sometimes call a capital T therapist. But to speak to what you're maybe saying a little bit, that's part of the juice, is that if you have a professional therapist, fantastic. That is great. I hope everybody who needs or wants a therapist can have access to one. But I will often kind of frame it as like, if a therapist is commonly working with people on not only like their actual right mental or medical needs, but on like past and current challenges or experiences, the work that I am doing as a wedding emotional support professional is like present and future, right? It's much more about real time and like future oriented, goal oriented skills and strategies to help the wedding planning experience not be that stress story. I'll sometimes talk about that too, that we have this huge narrative in our culture that weddings are like quote unquote supposed to be stressful, right? So many pieces of media. There was that movie Bride Wars, which I remember seeing and really liking, and then feeling super guilty about liking it. Um, that movie Bride Wars. There was a whole TV show, I think, called Bridezilla, and I have a
Oh God, yeah.
personal. Oh my gosh, I could do a whole episode probably on how I feel about the term Bridezilla.
Oh my God. Yeah,
Yeah,
I hate
but
it. I hate it.
right. Oh my gosh. But so many, right, different pieces of culture that contribute to this idea that like it's just supposed to be a chaotic and like really stressful time, and we just like get through it and then it's over and then I guess we're married and thank God.
Yeah.
And I think that that so doesn't have to be true. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I totally agree with you. I think wedding planning can actually be fun and enjoyable. And in order to make it fun and enjoyable, it is nice to have emotional support.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to echo what you were saying, therapy looks back.
Right.
Therapy is healing things about you in the current
Mm-hmm.
like place that you are standing, but look through the lens of looking backward. Whereas what you are doing with First Looks is looking forward to the future. And even if that future is like 2 weeks from now,
Mm-hmm.
or 10 years from now, you are focusing on the moving forward piece and not the, retrospective.
Yeah, and certainly some past or retrospective pieces come up, right? Reflection is really important. I think maybe too the other really important piece that would distinguish what I offer from somebody who maybe also has a therapist, because I think actually probably the majority of my emotional support clients also do have professional therapists, which like again
I
is
would
wonderful.
imagine because they
Yeah,
have an awareness that they
right.
might need something like
Right.
that.
And so one of the biggest distinctions, or like most helpful distinctions for them, is that I'm a wedding industry professional, right? I do this almost every weekend, and the
Yeah.
vast majority of therapists, I would imagine, are not, right? Like
Yeah.
intimately familiar with the wedding industry, and so there's that piece too of like I have training and skills, which like great. But the real time experience again of like being in this industry, being part of this industry, and having worked with so many dozens, I think maybe even hundreds at this point, of humans, right? Celebrants, their loved ones, their friends. It's that context that ends up being really, really valuable as well.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we are going to take a very quick break on the wedding dish, and we will be right back with Jacquelyn of First Looks. And we are back on the wedding dish. I, of course, am Sarah Alapin, and I am joined today by the founder and CEO of First Looks, Jacquelyn Burt. I want to take a couple seconds and backtrack here. I know you were on the show before, but that doesn't mean everybody's listened to that episode. So tell me How did being a makeup artist and also getting this education in, counseling and working in higher ed, how did these inspire the emotional support piece of First Looks?
Yeah, that is a beautiful question. I will sometimes make jokes and like puns, again, going back to that, like raised by a preschool music teacher, about how my skills are like, right, like a blend of skills and experiences, like makeup blending, right?
Ah,
So funny.
boom, chick.
I know. Thank you. Thank you. This is why they hire me because I'm so funny. Oh my goodness. To answer your question, so yes, started in the wedding industry as a makeup artist, but certainly was aware really early on, I think in part because of probably just my own relationship with, quote unquote beauty and like the beauty industry and body image and some of those pieces. That makeup application, whether it was for your wedding day or a boudoir photo shoot or really anything, that it's an incredibly intimate experience. And makeup and beauty bring up a lot of really strong feelings for people. And again, going back to that idea that like sometimes it can bring up unconscious thoughts and feelings, right? If we're not maybe someone who wears a lot of makeup normally, or if maybe we've had a couple of difficult experiences with body image or beauty or makeup. So was aware really really early on in my work as a wedding makeup artist that it was an extremely emotional and extremely intimate thing to do. And I think in part because of how wedding days are traditionally structured, and so makeup applications and hairstyling usually are happening for people as like the first part of the day. There was this element too of like, I'm sometimes the very first person that a celebrant will see. And so, in terms of like getting them like right out of the gate and just kind of like taking it from the top, some of those emotional pieces just became so evident. And then my other career and the training and education that I've had in my other job is in education and identity development and student counseling. And so it's again working with people, because I work in higher education. I'm working with college age students or college students because they're all different ages actually. But working with people who are in the midst of really big decisions and they're learning new ideas and they're questioning values and relationships and their identities are moving and shifting around. And all of that is happening in this context of like lots of social and cultural stories about college, like college, right? This is supposed to be like the most fun you've ever had, and like and with weddings too, I was working or am working with humans on one of the most important and emotionally charged days of their lives in a way that really asks for trust and connection and vulnerability. And again, in the context of like, this is the happiest day of your entire life, and it's supposed to be the most beautiful that you've ever been. And so for me, the experiences of being like a wedding makeup artist and then also being like a college instructor and college student counselor, to me, it's almost like they're really the same job, or at least they have really strong parallels. And so I'll sometimes say too that like my work is or like has become supporting big feelings during big changes within big celebration. So that is a very poetic, perhaps. But for real, I mean, right, those are some of the ways those things have fit together for me. And how I was like, man, yeah, like what a unique blend of skills and experiences, right? Having that familiarity with the wedding industry. I'm part of the wedding industry. I already am working with people in vulnerable and intimate ways. So let's rock, right? Like you deserve to feel good about your wedding and your wedding planning experience.
Yeah, not just look great, but feel
Hmm.
great.
That's why we say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't even say the tagline. Oh my goodness. My undergraduate degree, fun fact, was business marketing. And so every once in a while, too, it's like my marketing undergrad meets up with like, was raised by a preschool music teacher mother. And just like taglines are just my favorite sport a little bit. But the first looks name, business name, first of all, and then our tagline really is, I mean, like it's one of those cheesy things like taglines are marketing tools, but it really is a philosophy statement as well. And so we say that first looks is about offering and delivering beauty you can feel, right?
Ah,
Yeah, yeah, all of those parts and pieces, and sometimes we're not even aware of everything that's happening. But if I can help somebody feel seen and supported and celebrated in the midst of this like giant change, then like cool, that's the work. That's what I'm here for.
that is, I
Are you
mean, can I
crying? Are
give
you gonna
you
cry? You're gonna
can I give you a round of applause through my tear-soaked face?
uh-huh. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Oh my God, I love it so much. I am so here for the puns. You have no idea.
Oh, careful. We're gonna people are gonna have to sign a waiver before they listen to this episode. Like, are you ready? Oh my goodness.
Oh my God, I love it. That's hysterical. Um, now back to serious, Sarah. And how about we talk about adaptive communication? Let me ask my real question
I
here.
got you. I
Sorry.
got you.
Okay, so I do want to talk about adaptive communication
Yes.
because I think this is a really important piece and something that I think our listeners can take away from this conversation and actually start to
Mhm.
implement in their wedding planning process. So, what does adaptive communication look like, and how can it head off potentially difficult situations before they become dramatic or even explosive and not like pun explosive laughter, like
Right.
explosive as like it ruins your relationship with your
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think that might even be some of the expectation epiphanies that come up for folks is like because the wedding industry or even like the whole concept of planning a wedding is something that is really feminized in our culture, right? Like it's something that girls do, right? That women and femmes do. And so consequently, it often can be dismissed as something that is like silly, right?
Yep.
Like, oh, they're planning a wedding. And so they're very bridezilla, blah. Um,
Oh, you're picking out your flowers. Must be
right.
hard to find the right roses.
Right. And I think what we get caught off guard by then is that it actually can be some really high stakes stuff for people. And I think especially if it's something that we're caught off guard by or surprised by, is that when the stakes are kind of high out of nowhere, that's where some of that potential for like, oh shit, right? Like, oh, now we're talking about like how we feel about our relationship with each other. Okay, right? Like this is not flowers and napkins. This is like how people relate to themselves and their loved ones. Um, Adaptive communication, I think it's so funny because I mentioned this before we started recording, but I had said it was likely that we would model adaptive communication during our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But to keep it as simple as possible, so adaptive communication is just how we are making thoughtful and intentional choices in our communication behaviors and mindsets to adapt to whatever context we are in. So, a bigger picture example is maybe that, like, if I just show up as my, like, quote unquote, default self, right? Clinically extroverted. My college students have nicknamed me the off leash golden retriever of our department. Yes. Right. I know. And like the first time one of them brought it up, they immediately tried to backtrack. Like I think they thought that they had maybe really hurt my feelings. Um, But I was like, oh my God, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm so flattered. I am so excited. Like, put it on a t-shirt, tell everybody. Anyway, if
Oh my God, I relate so much.
I know that's why our whole episode so far has been laughing, which is great, genuinely. If I am just showing up in conversation with somebody, or even in like written communication, right? Because communication is more than just real-time speech. And I bring my like default golden retriever, really extroverted and really direct self. That might work a lot of times. But if I know, or if I can guess, that gets that part of the work. But if I know that the person in front of me is maybe not going to vibe as much with that, right? I definitely have college students and wedding clients who don't want to work with a golden retriever, right? They maybe love golden retrievers, but that's not what they necessarily want energy wise from their makeup artist or from their advisor counselor. So it is the awareness of knowing the context and setting that you're in and the person or people that you are trying to communicate with, and adapting your behaviors in order to communicate more quote unquote effectively, with more comfort, with more clarity.
I love that. That's super helpful. That made it really easy to understand. It and it's so funny because I was recently having this conversation with my husband about our dog Cluzo
Oh, yeah.
and how he how when we're trying to get him to be calm and relaxed, we have to bring our energy down so the energy of the room goes down.
Mm-hmm.
um and I have a friend that I absolutely adore who brings a lot of like Sarah energy
Uh-huh.
kind of thing, like where I can check my Sarah energy when I need to. This friend has some trouble checking that like extra big energy and comes into
Mm-hmm.
the space with that like,
Mm-hmm.
and then he's immediately like out of breath, like
Yeah.
panting
Oh,
French bulldog, like
oh my God.
too excited to like survive in the wild. I mean, I know he was totally meant to be a survive in the wild kind of dog to
Uh-huh.
begin with. Um, but it's a little bit of a similar, it's while you were talking about that, it just kind of like sparked in the opposite direction with actually interacting with animals.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are an animal person, that might be a helpful way to think about it, where, you when you're trying to get your animal to do something or behave a certain way, you have to meet a certain level of energy and communicate in a certain way. So, I mean, I know that's the very, very, very much simplifying what you were saying, but it kind of, in a way, it sparked that in me. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm
No,
totally fine being wrong.
nope. I think part of what I think can be really cool about relating with others, right? Any even somebody listening to this conversation between you and I, it's less about like, am I like, are you understanding the words that I'm saying, and more about like, am I like, are you receiving what I am delivering broadly? Because I think there are a couple elements when you were talking about your dog and like, right, what it brought up for you. What I think tends to be a challenge or like maybe a stumbling block for folks. And this gets back to the whole like the wedding day is not your day idea as well. And that's that sometimes when we hear that it can be helpful or like beneficial to change or make adjustments to our energy, our word choice, how we're asking questions, the words we're using to ask those questions. When we hear that, right, like maybe you could consider, right, doing this. It can sound like we are being asked to not be ourselves. And there's also, right, been such a huge increase in narrative around like how important it is to be authentic and like just be yourself and like pursue your needs, feelings, etc. I I think too, there's maybe an element of tone policing, which is a little bit different conversation and brings up some other dynamics. And so I want to be clear too that adaptive communication is not about tone policing in terms of, you having to like temper your own anger or your own frustration or your own, right? Like those feelings get to be there and show up and be shared. It's more about like almost a prioritizing of if ultimately you want to communicate a thought, an idea, you want to ask a question, right? Maybe you're seeking information from somebody. The ask is not to like be less yourself so that the other person feels better, right? That's manipulation. Or that can be, right? That can be tone policing. And much more about like, okay, in theory, the human in front of me is somebody that I care about or would like something from, or both. So what can I do to make sure that things feel clear, that they feel comfortable, that expectations are laid out, that I'm checking assumptions I might have, that I'm inviting the other person to check assumptions that they maybe have, right? So yeah, the challenge of like, you're telling me to not be myself, is an understandable response. But when we dig into it more, maybe with the help of a professional emotional support service practitioner.
Do we know anyone that does that?
I don't know. There's this girl with really great hair and great skin and
fabulous makeup.
I mean, thank you. She's a pro. She's a pro.
And she's jacked, guys.
Oh my God. It's true. According to legend, anyway. Oh my goodness. You are so good for my ego. I'm getting pumped up.
Ching! Another one.
And if you haven't stopped listening to this episode yet, maybe you can. Thanks for still being here.
Thanks for hanging in.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I mean, right. I think that's all really important stuff, and it can be really complicated stuff if it isn't, ideas or terms or practices that we've come up against in our lives, which ties to Fresh Start Effect in terms of like some of this stuff is really new for like most humans. And a wedding, or planning a wedding, right? The experience of planning one presents us with a shared social structure to practice some of this, right? Some of these ideas, try some stuff out, see what maybe lands with us. I know that how I communicate adaptively with like my parents is so different from how I adaptively communicate with my siblings or with my spouse, right? And again, that's not about me like not being myself or like shape shifting. And it's actually a gesture of respect and care. So rant over.
That was great. That was really helpful. So how do you prioritize communication during some of these stressful interactions that might be emotionally charged in the wedding planning process?
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by prioritize communication? Can you hear me modeling that really compassionate question?
I can. And it's funny because I was trying so hard not to lead you, but I'm just going to lead you right into the answer here, which is, when it's an emotionally charged conversation, communication is just key. And making sure that you are using that adaptive communication so that you can successfully navigate these relationships and maintain them and feel good about them on your wedding day and feel positive about the entire experience and feel grateful to have those people there with you instead of grabbing your makeup artist or your photographer when they walk into the room when you're getting ready and saying, "Oh my God, can I just talk to you for 3 seconds?"
Yep.
Because I'm about to strangle my best friend since I was 6 years old.
Yeah. Oh my God, girl, if I had a nickel for every time that's happened, I could have retired at like 11. Yeah.
It happens all the time and it's such a shame, but communicating and like making sure that you head a lot of this off at the pass, and guide it to be a positive exchange will make your day so much easier, so much more pleasant, so much more fun. And the whole process will make your relationship stronger
Mm-hmm.
instead of being a boulder that, rolls out at you and then knocks you down and then, whatever, spider webs.
Is
From Indiana Jones. Sorry.
Oh my God. Okay. I was like, what are you
She's like,
talking about?
she had the what the F Sarah.
Oh my God. This is again where, like, if I hadn't already shared that I have not seen this movie, my God, you're saying boulders. What? What is happening? Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. I love it so much. Well, so just a little spoiler alert here, everybody. We are going to do a 2-part. So Jacquelyn's going to come back and yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit about some people pleasing, and we're going to do some myth busting, and we've got some good stuff coming up. So she will be back. If you have questions, you can actually send them to us on our Instagram and I will pull them. So it's at the Wedding Dish Podcast. You can send us your questions if you have them about people pleasing, specifically with weddings. And it can be, is it good? Is it bad? Like whatever. It can be through whatever lens you come from or you are hearing about or you don't understand. Send us your questions. We're happy. I will pull them and I will ask when we do our part 2. But in the meantime, thank you everyone for tuning into the Wedding Dish. And Jacquelyn, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Where can our listeners find you online?
Yeah, thank you. They can find me in a couple different spots. So the website is just firstlooksllc.com. So looks is plural, first looks, exactly how it sounds, llc.com. Email is always a great way to get in touch with me, firstlooksllc@gmail. And then we are on Instagram. So I am just at firstlooksllc. Folks can definitely find me there, see pictures of really beautiful makeup there. My dog Maverick likes to show up a lot in the stories. So, and then, yeah, you can hear me talk a little bit more about people pleasing. It's my favorite thing to explore, probably favorite myth to bust.
Yeah, I'm excited. I am a natural people pleaser. So, and I'm okay with it. I know who I am. I just have to rein it in sometimes and remind myself that it won't be the end of the world if like people are upset with me for a bit.
I have so much to say. I'm going to save it.
I know. She's like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm
my
holding
cheeks
it back.
are like, stop it. Don't say it.
My cheeks are getting sore from laughing.
Oh my gosh. I mean, same. Abs too. You're going to have a 6-pack after talking to me.
Oh, yeah. Oh boy. Well, while you are finding Jacquelyn online and looking at firstlooksllc.com, you can actually also swing on over to the weddingdishpodcast.com. You'll be able to get show notes, which we'll link out to. We'll share a little bit of behind the scenes information from that we didn't go through on the podcast itself. And then you can get transcripts there because we're committed to accessibility, although I'm behind again. You want to make sure that it like spells everything correctly.
Of course, yeah.
It really is convinced that my name is Sarah Elephant. It just really is. Really.
Oh, no.
I know. Alapin and elephant must sound just so much alike. It is not adaptive. It does not learn. And don't forget to tune in next week. I'm really excited to have Jacquelyn back for another episode of The Wedding Dish, especially to talk about something in my own heart. And follow, rate, review The Wedding Dish on your favorite podcasting app. And until next week, we'll see you all soon. Cheers.